So after 6 months on the road, one of the questions that I get most often is it worth moving into a tiny house and traveling if you still have to work a full-time job? Spoiler alert, my opinion, absolutely 100% worth it. There are some things that you have to think about that you don't normally have to, so that's what this video is about. So stick around after this and I will get into the nitty-gritty of tips, tricks, and things that you should know before you jump into this decision. As much as I would love to say that the majority of my work is done from the comfort of a hammock or reclined on the couch downstairs, unfortunately that isn't the reality of the situation. I'm currently employed full-time at a regional bank back up in Ohio. They were nice enough to let me work from the road as long as I did not lose any of the productivity. To make sure that work didn't notice a difference between me in the office and me working in the tiny house, I had to have 3 things that were completely non-negotiable. The first one was a dedicated workspace, somewhere in the tiny house that I could set up everything that I need. The second one is a consistent power source. Boondocking is fantastic, but if I lose power in the middle of the day, that's a big no-no. And the third thing, and by far the most volatile, is a reliable internet connection that isn't going to fail me as I move from park to park to park. The least variable of the items, but the one that requires the most planning, is the dedicated workspace. We looked all through the house for somewhere that can be a dedicated workspace. And we ended up eliminating some stairs that would have gone to our skylight, converting that area into a fold-down desk, and making that my workspace right underneath the skylight. To make that space work, I jumped on Amazon and I ordered 3 telescoping television mounts, a bracket for a folding table, and then we went to Home Depot and bought a pre-finished shelf. I assembled all of those items into a completely tear-down desk that folds away when we need to hit the road and protects all of the components while giving me plenty of space to work. I've worked in that space for about 6 months now, and it works fantastic. The only thing that I do think that I'm going to add is a small set of drawers over on the right hand side that allow me to keep some things more securely as we move. So far, the easiest thing for us to have has been power. Everywhere we've gone, I've made sure that I have at least a 30 amp hookup that we can connect directly to the park. Some of the options that we're considering for the future could include a generator, some batteries, maybe some solar, but right now, staying in parks, especially state parks with 30 or 50 amp hookups, has really been the easiest solution with the most amazing views. The item that has been the biggest issue by far is finding a consistent, reliable internet source. When we moved into the tiny house, we were in a residential area outside of Columbus, Ohio, that did not have Verizon coverage for our cell phones. So I went to T-Mobile, and in talking to the folks at T-Mobile, they recommended that we check out the T-Mobile 5G home internet solution. That was a little bit outside of the box because it's not designed for someone traveling every 2 weeks like we do. It's designed for someone that lives in a rural setting, that lives in a house that can point it towards the tower and it never moves. That said, after talking with the sales reps for about half an hour, we determined that it would work and it would do a lot of areas that my Verizon coverage might not do. So I took that home, we hooked it up, and that very night we had actually very reliable internet in the middle of Utica, Ohio, that does not have coverage from anything else except for extremely spotty DSL. So we decided that we were going to keep that T-Mobile, which runs unlimited internet with no data cap, for $50 a month. And we were actually going to add on the Verizon 5G home internet for an additional $25. It's only $25 if you have a Verizon cell phone plan. If you have that cell phone plan, $25 unlimited data cap. If not, I believe it jumps up to 50 gigabytes. But for $75 a month, I was able to have T-Mobile 5G home internet and Verizon 5G home internet, as well as our cell phones as a backup plan if we ran into anything that had issues. The Verizon and T-Mobile 5G hotspots worked fantastic for the first 11 stops that we made on our travels, ranging from Ohio all the way down to New Orleans, and then back up to just outside of Atlanta, where we encountered our first real issue with the internet. The park that we stayed in north of Atlanta was the first time that we had issues with cell phone reception from either Verizon or T-Mobile, with the exception of Memphis, that I'll get into a little bit later because that was just a whole different story. The park had some areas that had fantastic 5G, so when I looked online, it looked like the park had 5G. So I would say 40 out of the 50 spots had fantastic internet. Of course, I chose one that did not have fantastic internet, and in fact had absolutely no reception whatsoever. So we had to scramble into finding something different, and that is when I got to test out Starlink. So Starlink definitely has its ups and downs. The downs are definitely the price. The equipment that you need to get started for the Starlink Roam, is what it's called now, is $600 plus $50 shipping plus about $50 in taxes. So $700 just to get the equipment. That doesn't include your monthly charge at all. The monthly charge is $150 a month for unlimited, but the Roam is deprioritized during their busy time. So anytime kids jump on to play Fortnite or people start streaming their TVs, your connection's going to get significantly slower. So in Memphis, Tennessee, we pulled up the website for the park that we were going to be staying at about 2 weeks just to check to get all of the information. And the park had updated their main site to have a big information bar that said no tiny houses, vans, or buses allowed. Unfortunately, that's where we were going to stay for 2 weeks while we were in Memphis, Tennessee. So we had to scramble and find another park. This made it so that I wasn't able to do the due diligence that I normally do to make sure that cell phone reception was what I was going to need to work while I was there. As we pulled into the park, I watched my Verizon cell phone bars go from 4 bars to 3 bars to 2 bars, down into SOS mode as we hit the entrance to the park. As we pulled to the back, I knew that it was going to be a rough one. So we backed the house into the parking spot, went inside, booted up Verizon, and sure enough, absolutely no connection available. We booted up T-Mobile, absolutely no connection available. I noticed a guy a couple spaces down from me that had a Starlink dish out, so I went and talked to him to see how his coverage was. And he said that his wife was completely unable to work from the Starlink upload. They were currently using an AT&T hotspot to get through her workday. One of the things that I researched before I hit the road was the idea of communal workspaces taking over full-time workspaces for a lot of smaller companies. And I saw that they were really great opportunities for people who worked from home 99% of the time, but may need an office to have a meeting with the team, or may need an office to have a meeting just one-on-one. And that's the idea that I took next. So I started doing a little bit of looking around and was able to find 5 or 6 different communal workspaces that would rent you high-speed internet, a dedicated workspace, and a safe area to work in a fairly high crime area. So I started looking, and I ended up finding one that was $100 a month, free or unlimited access to the building from the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., high-speed internet, coffee bar, microwave, refrigerator, all of the amenities that you would have in the office but in Memphis, Tennessee, while my home office was in Columbus, Ohio. So I ended up renting that office for a month for $99. I think that was actually a pretty fantastic rate, because for $100, I couldn't have activated Starlink for the month. I could not have bought an AT&T hotspot and activated it for a month. So that $100 gave me a dedicated space to work, high-speed internet, and really took away that stress of trying to figure out what I was going to do for the 2 weeks that we were in Memphis. So if you are somewhere that your internet isn't working, don't freak out. Take a quick look, search for the keyword co-working space, or co-hatch seems to be a pretty popular one that's in a lot of different spaces. Just see what kind of cohabitation space is out there and see what you can rent. I saw some that were as low as $49. I mean, you can't really beat that. And some of these places even have a nationwide chain that you can rent for a little bit more, and you can log into any of their co-working spaces. So if working in the tiny space is just starting to get to you a little bit, really look into these co-working spaces. See if it's something that works for you. One thing that I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention is how different working from the tiny house on the road is from when we were living in our 2,000 square foot house outside of Columbus. When we were at home, I would log off of work around 5 or 6. I would go down, we would cook some dinner, and then we would sit in front of the television and we would watch a television show that I had moderate interest in at best. But since we've started traveling, I get off work, I almost always log off right at 4:30, somewhere in there. And then I immediately head outside, whether it's to do something fairly in depth with the wife. Maybe we go find a waterfall, or we go hit up a museum that has a couple hours that they're still open. Or if it's just taking the dog for a walk in whatever state park I'm in, it's a completely different feeling than when I had the big house. I want to make sure that I stress that while working from the road full time definitely has its challenges, and it definitely has its downsides when you're inside and you look out the window and it's absolutely beautiful and all you want to do is be outside. The upsides are absolutely incredible. The ability to take a 15-minute break, walk out your door and be at a creek, or take the dog up the side of a mountain and be back in 15 minutes is absolutely indescribable. So I just want to make sure that while you do need to think about the problems that are going to arise, there's always going to be problems that are going to arise. Pivoting with those is absolutely monumental, but I cannot stress enough the upside that comes from a life of traveling around, staying in the most beautiful places in the US, and still being able to pay the bills, but also being able to have all of this when you log off of work for the day. Well, I'm sure that this is perfectly obvious from this video. I'm fairly new to this, but when I started researching what life was like for tiny houses that travel, I found that there was very, very little information out there. So I figured I would start sharing what I'm learning as we're doing this. So if you have something that you've been wondering about, comment it down in the comments and I will try to answer it in any upcoming videos that I will. I've got a few ideas in the bank, so I'm going to start making those videos that'll hopefully be helpful to you guys. But any questions that you can ask only help me out, and which hopefully will help you out with the information. So if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like so that it recommends it. So until next time, just remember, freedom is out there, and having a tiny house is a great way to find big adventure.